So thank you for coming to listen to a little bit about high school pathways. I'm Arnitria. I'm the Dean of College and Career Readiness. So oftentimes I have one foot in the high school setting with the counselors and another foot in the college setting. So one of the exciting things that has been happening over the past couple years is trying to put structure and framework around what's happening in high schools so that it sets students up for success when they get to college. So some of you may have heard the term PACE framework. We use it all the time. If I said it in a high school setting, they're like, oh yeah, that's that thing they're making us do. So basically what the Illinois PACE framework is, it's post-secondary and career expectations. And if you notice, it goes all the way down to 8th grade. So what's being said now by ICCB and ISAC and Illinois Board of Higher Education and the Illinois State Board of Education is that we should not wait until, let's say, August 13th to decide what a student's going to do after high school. We shouldn't wait until junior year. We actually shouldn't even wait to just freshman year. We should start looking at these things all the way back in 8th grade. So having been a K through 12 teacher, it all kind of makes sense because we have students that come to us sometimes and they haven't had an opportunity to really think about what their aptitude is, what their interests are, and what's going to be a good fit for them. And even though we all come to college to learn, we love to learn. I was an English major in undergrad. I love to read. But my mom made it perfectly clear that aside from teaching, Shakespeare was probably not going to give me a job. We go to college to get jobs. You evolve as a person, you enrich yourself, but in this day and age, most parents are trying to figure out how by the end of 12th grade, you're not going to spend the next 12 years living in my basement. So this is part of the don't live in my basement plan. But more than that, she's laughing because I know her daughter. I had her as a student. But beyond that, I mean, is that not, I have a daughter going to college next week, and I'm like, oh my God, she's going to come back. Yeah, we're not even going to get it. Yeah, or they never leave. Or, you know, they go off and they study something in our worst fear. You know, we hear these stories about people who have all this debt, or they studied a field and then found out there were no jobs out there. So there's some things that are being put into place because ultimately it all works together. So this Illinois PACE framework is actually an unfunded mandate for grades 8 through 12. They're going to have a metric for reporting it on the school report card. They haven't quite told them how that's going to work yet, but if you've ever gotten a mandate from the state of Illinois, you know that's typically how it works, that you get told what the markers are, and then you find a way, or they fill you in on how it's going to be reported. But in the meantime, you have to make sure you have the things in place so that when it's time for reporting, you've actually checked off these boxes. So this is actually a fancy version of the PACE framework that you're looking at now. It's a fancy version because it's ICC branded. Starting about a year and a half ago, we started meeting with our high school partners and some of the local and regional offices of education to discuss how can we partner with you to make sure that these things happen for students? Because if they happen for students along the way, it actually benefits us. What we also found out along the way is that many of these things tie into what a student's going to do after high school. And who do we want them to come to after high school? We want them to come to us. Not just because we want them here, but because we know we're a good value and we know they're going to get a high quality education. See, I worked those talking points in from the elevator speech. Okay. So by 8th grade, a lot of these things are things that are happening in the schools already. So good thing for the K through 12 schools, they don't have to go and reinvent the wheel, because some of these things are happening already. They just have to document them. So this wasn't like anyone saying, hey, no one's doing their job. This was more so, hey, everybody's got these great things going on. Let's see what you have and what you don't have. How can we fill in the gap? And ICC is standing right there like, yep, let's fill in the gap for you. So in 8th grade, if you notice all of these little areas that have an I next to it, those are areas where ICC either already partner with schools or we have the capacity to partner with schools. So by the end of 8th grade, complete a career survey, attend career exploration day. We already do some of that with students who come to different expos and things like that. the concept of career clusters and interests. Julie's going to talk a little bit more about career clusters during her session, but the best way to wrap your mind around career clusters is a lot of times we would have students come to us and they're like, I know I want to be a nurse. And then they start taking those classes and they're like, I know I don't want to be a nurse. And then we look at the cluster, though, of that area. So what can we still use these classes for that might still put you in the health area, the health services or health careers area, but it doesn't necessarily involve you, administering medication or giving shots or things like that. And that way a student can change their mind without completely going back to square one. So that's just a brief overview of career clusters. So then by the end of 9th grade, they're talking about revisiting that, talking about financial aid. That would be awesome. Freshman year already talking about financial aid. What are the options? That would help a student to see, what the possibilities are. As Dean of College and Career Readiness, I get excited about that part because I'm thinking some students can start taking dual credit as early as 10th and 11th grade. If they can get an idea of what college actually costs this early, then we can show them how ICC is probably your best value, especially if you're planning to transfer to a 4-year college, because we can get some of those gen eds out of the way, and we can make sure you're prepared when you're ready to, when you get ready to go. By the end of 10th grade, some of the things that are mentioned keeps going back to that career pathway and career cluster. It talks about an affordability workshop. It even talks about students should know different type of post-secondary credentials and institutions, because a lot of our students show up and they have no idea how any of this stuff works. So it will actually end up being to our benefit if this pathway is in place and students actually hit these milestones along the way. By the end of 11th grade, this is when we start really interacting with the students, especially through early college, sometimes through Strong Start. They're coming on campus and they're in classes. This is when we start getting phone calls from parents. This is even when we start having students come to our different college nights and college fairs. So down here, we're already having students attend a college fair, visit at least 3 post-secondary institutions. I'm like, we've got a post-secondary institution, come visit ours. Take at least 1 college entrance exam. Where can they take a college entrance exam? They can take it with us. They can come and find out, where they are with us. So when you look, the closer you get to the end, the more you see it's really an overlap with ICC and what the high schools are preparing students to do. And for a lot of our students, they need this overlap so that they can have a smooth transition. So when I say I kind of have 1 foot in the high school and 1 foot in college, it's to sort of make sure that those things happen, because it'll make the transition even smoother, especially when we start talking about completing FAFSA and attending a workshop. I know at our college night last year in the fall with admissions, they actually held sessions with parents to help them understand the financial aid forms and what the report, said. So as long as we can support these things as they're happening along the way, hopefully we'll be the first person that comes to mind when students think of post-secondary opportunities. And that doesn't always mean a 4-year or 2-year transfer degree. It could mean a certificate. It could mean a stackable credential. Some students may need to work while they go to college, so it could be an apprenticeship opportunity. It could be an earn and learn type of situation. So this is just the backdrop of what's happening in Illinois. And like I said, we put our border on it, but this is actually taking place across the state of Illinois. And I think reporting is supposed to start as early as next year. So we can play a significant role in making sure that high schools meet these markers. All right. And if you happen to want a large poster like this to go in your office, I have multiples. We had them made for our early college conference about 2 weeks ago. So if you want a copy, just let me know and I'll make sure you get one. We sent them to the high schools so that counselors could look up and see, oh wow, that's something that they actually do at ICC. All right, so to take a look at pathways, one of the reasons why pathways are important, let's see if I can get this one to come up, is if you were at the opening session this morning, you heard the wonderful news about how dual credit enrollment is up. Yay, that's great, that's great. However, we don't want students just arbitrarily taking dual credit courses. This one came up a little skewed. Let's see if I can get it to come up a little. clearer. Let's see. That's really the one I wanted to show, but let's see. Okay, that one's clearer. So what we want to do is make sure that while students are taking dual credit courses, they're taking courses that are actually going to set them up to keep moving along with that framework. So for instance, you know, making sure that students know that Math 110 and 111 are not like sequential. Like you don't take one and then take the next one. Because a lot of students don't know that. When we go out to the different high schools to present about dual credit, Lisa White had an experience where one of the counselors stood up and said, you know, we've got 4 different history classes and, you know, your student could graduate from high school almost a junior already, or almost a sophomore with like 12 to 15 credit hours in history. Okay, so think about a high school parent. They're thinking, oh, that sounds awesome. And some of our advisors have told us that they have students come in and they've got like 24 dual credit hours. And when they start looking at them, they don't really amount to anything. And as a parent on the other side, I have a daughter who just graduated from high school. Even though I know better, I was that parent. I'm like, yep, you're taking that. Yep, you're going to take that too. You're going to take that too. And in her case, I did it for rigor. I'm like, yeah, you're going to stay on top of this, do it for rigor. However, if it's a student who's going to come to ICC or go to any other college and they may need financial aid, it might actually damage that student if they do that. Because when they start looking at those buckets of, okay, you're going to be a business major. If you filled up all of those elective spots with high school dual credit courses, now ICC is going to say, well, you're almost done with your associate in arts or, you know, and there won't be space for you to take those courses. It's not the end of the world, but if you really have a student who for financial reasons is trying to transfer from their 2-year institution to their 4-year institution and transfer into their program as a junior, you really have to be careful about how you set up classes. So we figured out we couldn't just walk into the high schools and say, okay, no more dual credit. Yeah, that wasn't going to work because, like most parents want their students to have a challenging high school career. So what we figured out is that we actually needed to build these pathways for multiple reasons, but we needed to build them so that there was some structure around how students were taking courses, and also so that students could get a taste of it while they're still in high school, because guess what? You know, it's a lot cheaper to figure out you don't want to be a nurse in high school, you know, than it is once you're in college. Let's see if I can get the health careers one to show up again. One of the examples, many of you know that we have different dual credit offerings. One of them is CNA, and it's part of work-based learning. So during the course of a school day, students can actually go and get a CNA certificate. They can take the coursework, they do all of the steps, and then, you know, they actually have a finished credential, which is pretty awesome. Especially when you look down the line and realize that starting, I want to say next fall, for the nursing programs, you'll have to have a CNA certificate. So that could easily set a student up to get extra points on their scoring sheet when it's time to go into a particular program. So the one thing we knew is that we could not expect high school counselors to be college advisors. It's hard enough to be a college advisor when you're a college advisor, and it's hard enough to be a high school counselor when you're a high school counselor. So actually, let's see if I can get it to come up again. So actually, we had a team work together to come up with what are called the ideal pathways. Let's see. And what they did was they took a look at our course catalog here at ICC, and they took a look at some of the common dual credit offerings, and they took a look at the high school curriculum, and they figured out how we can make it all overlap so that students would actually come in with something that was usable. Let's see, I'm going to type in. So one of the people working on it is Margaret. And if you've been here for a while, you probably remember Margaret. So that's why I Googled her. I searched her name. I knew I could find it under her name. I apologize that you're having to see all of this stuff in the background. There we go. All right, there we go. All right. So here's an example of one of the pathways. So the high school pathways are a combination of career clusters and majors or areas of study that are offered here at ICC. So here's an example. So rather than saying, hey, we know we're going to have some students who want to go into nursing, let's just have them take, a couple of science classes and we'll see how that goes when they graduate. This is actually structured, so at the bottom you'll see in the blue there are actual classes listed out that the students should take. And at the top, there are some, sort of guiding principles that should help the counselors out. This keeps a counselor from having to be a college counselor. Now, is this always going to work in every school setting? No. We have lots of variables at play. Julie and I kind of celebrated a little bit last week because we actually have is it a networking or information systems pathway? And we found an instructor, which it's a feat because for a lot of these pathways, a person who would be qualified to teach it could also be out in the industry making 3 times as much money. Or they work during the day, they have a regular day job, and if we're looking at pathways during the high school day, they won't be able to come over and do it. So we were very excited that we actually found someone. So that's one of our biggest challenges. So just to plug out there, if you happen to have friends who've retired and they have certain degrees, send them our way. You never know, we might be able to connect them with a high school who's in need of a teacher so that we can actually make these pathways a reality in more schools. So here's an example. This freshman is going to take these courses freshman year. Now, how often do we know students come in and they're like, oh, I didn't take Algebra 3 or I didn't take Algebra 2. And they have no idea by the time they get to us that they needed to take that class junior year in high school to not end up in 09 something or to not have to go backwards. So this way they have an idea of what they should take. Sophomore year, they should take anatomy and physiology, algebra 2, and then any type of health career seminar that's offered at their institution. Once we get to junior year, this is when you start to see some of our dual credit courses coming into play that they could take in their high school. So of course they should take chemistry in their high school. Don't skip the high school chemistry, you're going to need that. College success, everybody needs that course. And if we can get it embedded in you earlier, the better. We have D squared, those students who are going to come to ICC's Peoria campus and basically spend their full school day and earn their associate's degree at the same time as their high school diploma. This class is on their schedule for the fall because you need 110. And that's a place where you can take it and start actually applying those things. We have intro to health careers, medical terminology, first aid, and then some sort of humanities course. Now, I love English, but notice it didn't say humanities, like as in 7 of them. Just, maybe 1. And then that's when we would look at that IAI guide and see, okay, what's the most transferable humanities course a student could take that's not going to land them in trouble, but will help them check that off their list at a cheaper price. So then by senior year, this is when we start looking at, so which route do you really want to take? That would be a time where a student could actually do work-based learning and complete CNA if they're thinking about going into nursing. We have several local schools that actually have CNA programs going at the high school. And it's the same rigor, same pace, same requirements. For most of those students, they do get it at a slightly cheaper price, so they see the benefit of being able to get that in high school. The next one would be EMT paramedic. That's a program that we've actually had expand, so we have even more high schools coming on this year. Some of the smaller high schools are sending groups of students, so there may be 15 students, but they're from like 3 or 4 different schools, and they are able to actually get their certificate and sit for the exam. So the good thing about those 2 things is that these are students who actually will have a credential that they can use to work when they go away to college or when they come to ICC. When I was TRIO director, I had multiple students who worked as CNAs or worked as EMTs while they were pursuing their education because they just couldn't afford to not work at all while going to school. A couple of students even figured out if they worked at one of the local hospitals while they had their CNA, they were able to get tuition reimbursement later on down the line. So it actually worked out really well. So to have that under your belt senior year would be a really good thing. And then at the bottom, let's say you've decided along the way, you know what? I've done intro to health careers. Maybe I want to go more into the management side of health careers or something along those lines. That's when we have students then stick really close to those gen eds that you're going to need no matter where you go. That's when we stick with English 110 and intro to communications and psych, maybe anatomy and physiology, and then your math class based on what area you're thinking about going into. So this is our ideal pathway for health careers. How does this all sync up? When we look at the workforce side, we see all the different programs that you could go into, and ideally with that PACE framework, high school counselors will be pointing students to this saying, these are all the different health careers. You know, you don't have to just be a nurse or a nurse's assistant. There are lots of different things you can choose from. So then if we go to our ICC website, how many of you have been to this page already, the Career Pathways page? If you go to the home page and you click on academics, if you let the cursor sit on catalog, career pathways will come up. And if you click on career pathways, it shows you some of them that have been established already here at ICC. One of the things to keep in mind, and we're figuring this out, this site is of course going to need update because as programs update and deans send updates, some of the requirements will change. But let's say we've decided to go into this cluster of health sciences. Where can I go? I'm going to click on registered nurse. And let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger. All right. So if you notice the way this is set up, it actually starts with point of entry. The career cluster is health science. The pathway is therapeutic services. That I always think of that one as you touch patients. And then the ICC pathway is nursing. So we have a cluster, an overall pathway, and then how that plays out at ICC, because that's the biggest thing. A lot of times students don't know. They know what they want to be, but they don't know what that's called when they get to ICC. So we talk about the different points of entry. The little yellow point of entry talks about dual credit, and if you notice, it's those same classes that were just on that ideal pathway. So we're telling students, if you're thinking about doing nursing, these are some of the classes you could take. Then we talk about if your point of entry is high school diploma or GED. This is where we get into talking about stackable credentials and where students can see, if I do the nursing assistant, and if you click on that, it'll give you all of the courses and all the great information there. It's even tied to the MZ data that will click through and show you the wage amount. That could actually stack into the credential for LPN. Then they have LPN to RN completion, or you could do the route of nursing assistant and then the RN program. So this is the component that many students didn't understand, and actually, you know, depending on the area you work in the college, it's kind of fuzzy sometimes how all of that fits together. The good thing about drawing up the high school pathways is that it shows how they sync and intertwine with the actual ICC pathways. So that's the registered nurse one I did. I think I'm going to take the setting off. I can't see because it's really kind of big from here. Let's see. All right. So that's a general overview of pathways. They are being built out. For just about every program you would click on under here, there is a pathway. So let's click on restaurant management. For early college, we have a couple of courses there. That's one of those areas where we're really working on trying to make the high school's culinary program compatible with our culinary program so that the credits that they get there will count. We're even looking at articulated credit, where basically if their curriculum matches up well enough with ours and they're competent, we can actually say, okay, if you come to ICC within this number of years, we'll give you college credit and you can start at the next class after that. Another way to make students drawn in. And then they can go into that Associate of Applied Science. All right. So I left some time for questions, because I know for some people this may be something you never hear about or never talk about, and it kind of gets mixed in with a lot of other things too. Anyone have any questions? Yes, sir.
It's physical sciences.
Yes, yes they are. Yes, they are. If we have time, I'll go back in. I mean, it's kind of fun. Just
a confusion a lot of students get coming from high school. They think, I want to be an engineer. And then find out, no, I don't want to be an engineer.
Yes. Yes, yes.
Because they don't know the difference.
True.
And a lot of the counselors don't know the difference.
Yeah, and that's the hope, is that this website that almost will become like this repository where high schools can easily come, and when they're working with the student, before that student even gets to us, they have something easy that they can use to say, hey, take a look at how this plays out at ICC, or how this credential would work, or whether or not this is something you really want to do. And it's going to take some time and some coordination, you know, to make sure that we have the right classes lined up in high school, that we have the right classes staffed, because in some of those areas it's really hard to get someone into the high school. We had a small victory last week. Unfortunately, we all know about mid-state closing. And there were a group of students, very impressive young ladies from Manual Academy, who were in the middle of the medical coding program, like right in the middle, and mid-state closed. So they're standing there with like this bundle of credits. And one of the reasons I was really impressed is because these are young ladies who, they're starting their senior year next week. They'd already passed Anatomy and Physiology 205 and 206.
Wow.
And
I can't even pass
yeah. So, I mean, they were very impressive, and they had certain health career fields that they wanted to go into, but this was a good opportunity for them to get that feel. And, you know, some of the classes are transferable, you know, even if you decide to go elsewhere within that particular cluster. So we were able to take a look at our program, and fortunately, our health careers did a great job of working with these students, and we figured out, it was like divine, their credits actually matched with ours. I mean, that doesn't happen all the time, especially if you're talking about certain occupational credits, but they actually match. So these students are going to be taking online classes through us during the day in their high school. So they'll be in the online class with other ICC students, and then each semester there's one course that they have to come on campus in the evening to take. And their parents were so happy that they were going to at least be able to complete this. They're like, hey, if that's all we got to do is bring them to one class a week in the evening, we'll do that. So those are some of the adjustments and things that we're probably going to have to do. The line is getting a little blurred between high school and college, but remember, it's only for specific students. Every student is in their own place. At the same time, we're working on transitional math to help those students who need to catch up. So it's like either catch up, I don't know if you saw in there, but there's catch up and there's speed up. There's some students, high school isn't moving fast enough for them. So they're ready to come to us. Those D2 students, second semester, sophomore year in high school, they placed into all college level courses. Yeah, that kid needs to go to college. Otherwise, they're going to wreak havoc in your building. On the other hand, you know, there are some students who, you know, maybe they need time for a little bit more emotional maturity, or maybe they don't want to take on that just yet. Those are the students that we want to make sure we have opportunities in the high schools for them. Yes?
So you mentioned that, I think I got this right, one of the hopes is that this might give a little more direction, like the dual credit or dual credit college, right?
Yes.
It makes a lot of sense. Partly because you said one of the risks is if a student, you know, piles up a bunch of courses that don't help, then there could be financial aid. Okay, so I guess here's my question, and again, that all actually makes good sense to me. Is there any risk or worry, or what would happen if the student, you know, does some of this and decides, not only do I not want to be a nurse, I don't want to have anything to do with health. Like I want to go teach English in high school, for example, right? Does this, how much flexibility does the student still have then to sort of just switch entirely? Does that make sense?
They still have some flexibility. Yeah, it does. It makes sense because many of the courses that they're taking, even let's say along that health careers pathway, we could still take that course and plug it into your science requirement. We could still take that. So it's still early enough in the game. And you may end up with one or two that, might throw it out of whack. But yeah, we try to keep it general enough where even if you did still change, you won't cause too much damage. And at least it's at a lower ticket price on the front end. We all know that's the other parent nightmare that I'm afraid of right now, that, you get all these courses set up, you send this college all of your money, and your kid's like, no, I want to do a blank. And you're like, no, you're doing blank because I already. But, at the same time, I try to look at it from the perspective of even when you go to a 4-year college, typically they try to keep you on a slightly narrow path that first year. Because in case you change your mind, you can still take your Social 110, your Psych 110, and your math course and your biology and go on your merry way to another area. We're trying to keep it, sort of locked like that. And like we have an education pathway for people who are interested in teaching. The courses are like Social 110, Psychology 110, and then there's like one education course. And that's sort of like, you can test the waters, see if it's what you like. And if you don't, at least you didn't have 4 education courses, in one semester, and then find out that's not your thing.
Yeah, I was looking at the list, and a lot of them are just the launch points for sequences.
Yeah.
So they don't get locked into a sequence.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the goal. Eric?
A lot of the launch points also qualify as JED ed.
Yep, they still fall under that list. And that's one of the things we did when we met with the high school counselors. We gave them that Illinois articulation, we gave them that list so that they can have an idea of these are the courses that we're typically going to try to stay around. And we also had them take a good look at the number of credit hours you need in that area. If you only need 9 in one area, it's probably not a good idea for a kid to take 12 of those in high school. They just might not need them later on.
So my question, to provide a little context, my question is coming from a place of working with Christian college students and parents and families of Christian students. And I'm curious to know what the process looks like in terms of students who sign up for dual credit opportunities in particular or anything else, and what that process looks like, because I'm seeing in my experience that students aren't understanding that what they do in high school and how they perform in these classes and dual credit courses will come back to haunt them in the future, when
Yeah.
especially when they want to go to college. And I've interacted with parents who say, well, I didn't know anything about this dual credit course. I never signed for anything. I want their grades removed. I want their GPA reset. I want their financial aid completion rate to go back where it has to be. And and just in our program alone, we're running into some of those issues. So I can only imagine what's happening across the college with Christian students.
So and I've run into that too. It's a challenge. I used to be a dual credit instructor years ago. I taught English 110 and 111. And you have a couple of categories there. The first category you have is, if I pretend like I didn't know what this was, then they'll make it go away. That's not a big category, but it's a small category of students. Then you have the category of students who really just didn't grasp or didn't, for a 17-year-old, you talking to me about what I'm going to do when I'm 20, that's like 200 years from now. I'm not worried about that. And then, of course, you have those people who are really savvy. They know the ins and outs. One of the things that we've done to try to remedy that, we just actually finished working with marketing to come up with some materials for parents that parents have to see, so that it's really spelled out. I mean, because I know I stood in front of classes and said, okay, this is the beginning of your college transcript, and if prom is next week, I'm not listening to you. And it's not the kids' fault, it's just the nature of kids. So another thing that we do now is that, and we encourage the high schools to do it, we do it directly with the Strong Start students that we work with, but we've encouraged the high schools to do it, is get signed release forms. Forms that have to go home, and it has to have a parent's signature that says, I approve of my student being in this class, because we had situations like that, and that's scary the thought that a kid could say, oh yeah, I'm going to do that, that sounds fun, my two best friends are taking that class, so I'm going to take it too. Not realizing the impact it could have later on. And Eric's right. I mean, we had situations where students came in and they were already on financial aid probation or ineligible because they got, a D and a C in a class, or they withdrew from the class. So we are really taking some steps. Lisa White goes out to the high schools now. She tends to go out to parent nights as well. And our counselors have really become our best allies, the counselors in the high schools. I think for a while there was a bit of a disconnect in terms of who gives this information to students. And I know, and this may have been your experience, when I was teaching dual credit, I was expected to fill students in on all of that, and I did, but I'm like, but I'm the English teacher. I don't, I didn't really always understand all the ins and outs. Fortunately, I had a couple of jobs at the time, so I did. But if you're just showing up at a high school and you're just the biology teacher, you might not know about financial aid completion rates and things like that. So Lisa White does a lot more going out physically to the schools. We bring the counselors here twice a year to try to fill them in on this information so that they have that relationship with students and families, and they can explain things like that. For our dual degree students, we actually had them write an essay. We got counselor surveys back, and we actually had the parents sign off on everything, and we had a parent orientation because it's that serious. And we told students, do not ever feel pressured to do anything like this because it's okay to wait. It's okay to wait. But you're right, a lot of students who don't understand the ins and outs, yeah. One of the things we just talked to students about, or counselors about, was if you have a student who wants to be in the room for the information, but they may not want to take that risk of that hit to their GPA, we do have a rule that says as long as that student is qualified to take that class, they can be in the classroom and not take it for dual credit. We have to have their name on a roster so that we can make sure that they would actually place into that class, but they do have that option, and that's kind of a safeguard to keep a student from feeling like, this could really hurt me later on.
Auditing?
Yeah, it's kind of like auditing, so you'll still get your high school grade for it. And you have to have qualified, like say it's English 110. You have to have placed in English 110 to be in the room, but you don't have to take it for dual credit. Yeah, so that's an option that we talk to students about too.
She's taking it for high school credit instead.
Yeah.
But then when they come to ICC, they gotta take it again?
Yeah,
But wait, can I?
but they kind of have a leg up,
I have two questions. To make sure I understand, then the biggest issue is that they may take the class and fail it and be using up their eligibility for like financial aid.
Yes.
Okay. That's the biggest hurdle, the biggest
Yeah.
problem. And then I also understood though that like dual credit classes don't transfer to the university. Like they'll transfer to ICC, but then when they step up to transfer to ISU or something, that becomes a gray area. Is that, does anybody know anything about that?
I know it used to be like at U of I, if you took English 110 as a dual credit class, they would not accept that alone. But if you took 110 and 111, they would take them together. So some colleges might have some little tweaks like that, but I feel like in general, you request an ICC college transcript to go to ISU. ISU doesn't know if you took it at your high school or at ICC.
Yeah, they won't know.
It's a college credit.
And that's
So-
another thing, dual credit courses, they don't necessarily they show up on the transcript just like any other class. They show up just like any other class. If we have, any school that we have articulation agreements with in Illinois, they honor it. We all know, sometimes you have the case of a U of I or some school that's like, well, no, we want you to take our version of this, or they have some rules there. And we really do encourage our dual credit students, especially those who take multiple classes, to come and actually talk to our advising department. Because if you have an idea of where you're going to be going, it doesn't hurt, to start planning that out. And we've been arming students with transferology too, because that's another good way to, get an idea of what's this going to turn into later on. All right, anyone else? All right, am I on my time? I don't know what time I'm supposed to be done.
3:15.
Oh, okay. I'll take one more question.
Okay, thanks. Because I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. Because I guess I get them confused a little bit, the difference between like early college, dual credit, concurrent enrollment, AP.
It's not just you.
Early college is an umbrella term.
Yes, early college is an umbrella, so that's the name of the department. So under early college, we have a couple different things here at ICC. So the first thing we have is traditional dual credit. That means, we probably have a qualified high school teacher, they're HLC qualified. They're teaching that course in the high school. They work with the academic dean at ICC. They've been approved, and they teach the course. Then we have typical, it's like dual credit part 2, where sometimes it's a teacher from ICC, it's an actual ICC adjunct or ICC faculty who goes to a specific high school and teaches the course there. Then we have work-based learning, which that tends to happen with the CTE programs a little more, and sometimes, like in welding, certain high schools will send their students over in the afternoon to learn welding with our instructors. Or some schools like Limestone have very elaborate welding programs already set up. Their faculty have been HLC qualified, and they can teach some of our welding classes at their school. And then, and then we have dual degree, or D squared, which is new. It's a pilot program where we have about 19 Peoria Public School students and one from Dunlap who, as of second semester sophomore year, placed into all college level courses. Their schedules have been articulated to the T over the next 4 semesters, and they will graduate from high school and with their Associate of Arts degree at the same time. So it's a pilot, it's just Associate of Arts now. Hopefully we can, expand it, but, you want to move slowly and make sure, we've got everything covered. So we had an orientation for those students last week. And then the last one we have, Strong Start, is typically what we refer to it as. And these are students who spend most of their day at their high school, and then in the afternoon, they come over to ICC and they take courses that they get credit for at their high school as dual credit. But they blend right into the population. Like, you could have one in your class and you might not even know if they didn't identify themselves. But these are students who either they have enough credits already to graduate from high school, and this is just an opportunity for them to use the rest of their school day to come to ICC, or they're counting those classes as dual credit and they're coming on over to campus. So
the 2 students that were taking online classes are also getting credit at their high school for those same classes?
The medical coding students, yes. And that was one of those things. A lot of that happens, that's where I have a foot in the high school again, where we sit down with the high school counselors, and they sit down with their curriculum guides, and we sit down with ours, and we figure out, okay, does this course meet the requirement of what a student will need to graduate from high school? So, yeah. Hopefully this all made sense. I'm sorry I had to pull up things while I was speaking, but if you have any questions, just email me. And once we have the pretty versions of those ideal pathways all put together, from what I understand, they're supposed to be done like mid-fall. I'll make sure they'll be on our early college website, but if anyone's interested, just shoot me an email and I'll forward them over to you as well. I think the sign-in sheet went around, and then there's a code up here you can scan to give feedback. I've never done one of those before, but I bet it's kind of cool. My phone knows how to do it because it pops up on my phone all the time. I don't know how to do it. So thank you all so much, and thank you all for your